Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Very excited for today's conversation with William Gates. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a second. First, want to direct you to a few places. The first is our website, sportspectrum.com. Make sure you go there every single day for new content, including every podcast. We got different articles and stories on the intersection of sports and faith right there at the website, sportspectrum.com. And then a great way to start your day right with the Lord. We're all looking for something, maybe just a little extra besides prayer, getting in the Word, and certainly fellowshipping and going to church. Well, how about a daily devotional every single day, 6 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, right there at the website, sportspectrum.com. So make sure you check that out. And again, also to all of you listening to this podcast, we are grateful that you tuned in. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review, all of those things that help get the podcast out, help get the word out, and continue to grow our audience. Our largest audience ever happened in 2020 with Sports Spectrum, and we're just excited to see where this might go and what God is going to do. And we're going to continue to bring you these amazing stories of sports and faith here today on the show. We are grateful for our sponsors, Water Mission. We've been working with Water Mission now for quite some time, and they just do such great work, a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry that fights the global water crisis with safe water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions in developing countries and disaster areas, serving more than 5 million people in 56 countries around the world. You can help be a part of the great work Water Mission is doing, especially in the midst of COVID-19, by checking out their website, watermission.org, as they fight the global water crisis, watermission.org. We're also presented by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. They got a great initiative right now called Fill the Stadium, 70,000 kids in desperate need of help. And they've been doing this initiative for a while now. They're starting to make a dent, but there are still thousands, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 kids right now who are stuck in crisis and need help. So we're asking you to consider going to fillthestadium.com to donate right now and help release these kids from poverty. Fillthestadium.com. This stadium is a stadium that cannot remain empty. Today on Sports Spectrum, I'm really excited to bring to you the story of William Gates. He is one of the stars of the Oscar-nominated documentary Hoop Dreams that hit theaters back in October 1994 and featured William, along with Arthur Agee, and their story of going after their dreams to play basketball, not just in college, but eventually to play in the NBA. And it's a phenomenal documentary. And as a kid in the 90s who grew up in the 80s and 90s, growing up and watching basketball, playing basketball, when I went to that movie theater in October of 1994 and saw Hoop Dreams as a 21-year-old kid, it was just amazing to me. I mean, documentaries weren't what they are today, and you didn't have all of the different media outlets in places like Amazon and Netflix to be able to do documentaries, and even YouTube like you could. In 1994, it was the movies or it was television and cable, and you didn't see a lot of documentaries like this. And you can just tell, and I can't wait for you guys to hear really the story of how Hoop Dreams came about, but you can just tell this was a project that was over 5-6 years in the making, maybe even longer. And so it took a while for them to put this movie together. The movie's almost 3 hours long. I recently rewatched it, and it's phenomenal. It holds up even today, and I can't recommend it enough if you haven't seen Hoop Dreams. But when I got, pitched the idea to have William Gates on the show, I did some research, and I saw, wow, this guy, maybe he didn't make it to the NBA, but God had bigger plans for him, and he actually ended up in ministry at Moody Bible Institute and becoming a pastor. So this is a fun conversation and personally one that I was just excited about in talking to William Gates, the star of the Oscar-nominated documentary Hoop Dreams. He joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. Let's take a listen. In the midst of a pandemic, you got a lot of time to watch a lot of different shows too, and I know a lot of people were interested in watching, things on Netflix, the Jordan documentary, which was just fantastic on ESPN. We could probably spend an hour, William, talking about the Jordan doc. I know you're a big Mike fan, but it was also a time to kind of reconnect with some older shows and some older movies. And one of those was Hoop Dreams, which is obviously something you're asked about and affiliated with and will be for the rest of your life. I just rewatched it, and my goodness, that holds up. And yet it's so 1980s and early 1990s when you think about the time and think about the styles and really the time. I mean, the whole thing starts with you watching the 1988 NBA All-Star game, which I will never forget that game as a Celtics fan, and Bird and Isaiah and Mike are all playing on the same team, Michael Jordan. I'm just curious let's start here because I really want to dive deep into Hoop Dreams for a minute. How many times have you watched that documentary, that movie?
Maybe 5.
5, not a ton.
Not a ton.
So you haven't sat down. Have you sat down with the family? Like I assume your boys have seen it and your daughter.
They have. Interesting enough, we've never watched it as a family though. Everybody kind of just went in their own space, watched it when they got to the appropriate age. One of the things that I've always done was when my boys were coming up, I actually didn't let them see, junior year and sophomore year. And not because, I didn't want them to not see it. It was more as they were starting their careers, I just didn't want them to see a negative.
Yeah.
In that way that, man, if that happened to dad, is that, that's going to happen to me. And I heard a lot of people say, well, you shouldn't think that way. It wasn't that I was thinking that way. It was me really just wanting to, and I still believe this, build up a certain level of confidence in them that, like, for example, what did happen with my oldest boy, well, he did end up having knee issues, but the mere fact that it didn't derail him. He didn't look at it and say, oh, man, my dad went through it, so it hit me too. So, no, it was... But yeah, to answer your question, 5 times, and probably because I lived it.
Right.
I lived it. But
well,
I will say this though, Jason. I do appreciate it being shown now, because what it has done is, it forever placed my brother here with me. So I'm grateful for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's your older brother, Curtis, who's featured quite a bit in the documentary. Can you tell us what happened to Curtis? I think it was, 2001 that he passed?
Yeah, Curtis, man, from what we were told, he was getting some gas at a gas station and was carjacked. And somehow the guy took him to his house. He escaped, ran up down the street, ran into another person's house and ran through, but the guy continued to follow him and just caught up with him in the street and shot him in the back. So, it was just really a really down period in my family's life. And, interesting enough, from that negative, it really pushed me into the ministry more and more, because it took a lot of soul searching and heart searching and not feeling angry and upset and disappointed to really get through that, because Curtis served as, the leader in our household.
Yeah.
He was the fabric, what he said, his opinion, not only carry weight, you did it. I mean, Curtis had become not just the inspirational leader, but he was, the father figure, the big brother, the first guy to do it, kind of, in a sense. So he was that leader. And when that element was gone, I will admit, Jason, I felt lost for a very, very long time, because that was, I when I needed, I called, and not to be able to place that phone call was just, it just left a huge void there.
When you guys were younger growing up, and that was the beauty of the documentary too, in the movie, is that you get to kind of see a glimpse inside your whole family. It's not just following William Gates and Arthur Agee. It's following your family. It's talking to your mom. It's talking to your brother. It's talking to people in your life, in your family, and Arthur's as well. So you got to get a glimpse, and Faith was somewhat prevalent in the film, not a ton, but I think when you grow up in the inner city, in the Black inner city, faith's important to a lot of people there. What was that for you growing up with mom and your brother? And, just was faith a component, as a kid growing up?
I'd say this, faith was a component, but it didn't rank first.
Sure.
One of the things, but we were fortunate enough in the community and in the neighborhood where we had after school programs that were all faith based. So one was called Cycle, and every day you would get that biblical lesson where they would share with you about responsibility, share with you about friendship, share with you about getting along with one another. Another organization was called Sunshine, and they would share with you about your faith and how to grow stronger and closer in God. And another was called Young Life. And so literally every day, I was involved in a faith-based after-school program, Monday through Thursday. And the caveat of it was we went because afterwards you got to play basketball. So,
of course.
So in order to play basketball, you had to get the Bible lessons. So that's what we did. But in retrospect, man, they put a foundation in us that, like even when I got to St. Joe's, that wasn't my first experience with God. When I got there, I wasn't like, oh my goodness, what is that cross doing up there? No, we were fully aware. And even with my mom, because she worked so much, faith was always in the home. And, but it was more from hey, I need you to do right. I need you to be right. Hey, I'm not here. So I got to trust you. So it came from that perspective, which was biblical based without saying the biblical based words.
Well, sure. I mean, even this podcast, if I'm being completely honest, and all ministry is drawing them in to do something that's very, they're listening to this show, hopefully some people, because they like sports, but then we're going to give them the gospel too. We're going to give them Jesus, and hopefully there's some fruit, or some seeds, I should say, that take root, that can plant and grow into something bigger.
Hey, Jason, can I hold on 1 second?
Yeah.
Hey, Jay. Here's what's interesting, Jason. You talk about faith-based thing. My son just came downstairs, man. This is happening at this moment.
Okay.
Getting ready to go for, he started his first job today, man.
Okay.
So you're talking about, faith-based, with everything that's going on in the world, didn't know if, where things were going to be. He's a college graduate. You know how all the college graduates are trying to find jobs, trying to do things.
Of course.
But here he is, man. I'm looking at him. He got on his khakis. He got a little lanyard on his, he got his shirt, just one of them proud dad moments happening.
Well, do we need to pause this right now so you can go give him a big hug, or are you good?
No, he's going out the door. We good. But
okay.
I just wanted to share that because I'm like, man, again, that's just another one of those things where you're trying to say, man, what good is coming out of this? And that's one of them. We keep fighting. We keep pressing.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad that happened. I'm not going to edit that, by the way. We're going to keep this all in for people to listen to, because that's real life. And that's kind of what Hoop Dreams was like. When you watched it, I felt like I was getting real life. Now, of course, because I want to ask you, there's cameras everywhere following you. So it's not real life. It's reality television in some ways that turned into what the 90s and 2000s and even to now is still around. But I'm watching this movie and seeing a glimpse into what I feel like is the real life of William Gates and his family. Do you remember when you were first approached, or your mom, I presume, was first approached about this idea? Can you kind of take me back? Because I think the whole movie starts with you going into ninth grade. Right. But this had to have taken place even maybe a months or years before.
Actually,
no.
Okay,
take me back.
Interesting enough, my involvement actually is just like how the film starts with Arthur playing against Isaiah. I'm already at the St. Joe's camp, but I hadn't committed to the film because I didn't know those guys yet.
Right.
And so when they come out and they talk to Ping and he's says, sure, let's do it. They have Arthur come out and play. He's playing against Isaiah. And then after that camp, Ping talks to the guys and say, hey, listen, I see what you guys are doing, which, by the way, Hoop Dreams originally was called Higher Goals. And the whole ideal of it was to show how kids go from street ball to organized basketball, which, after 2 weeks of filming, they said, we think we got something else.
Yeah.
And so Ping, believe it or not, I know a lot of people gave Coach a lot of flack for this, but he was the one that introduced me to the guys, because he said, listen, I got a kid that's coming from Cabrini Green, and you want to talk about going from street ball to organized basketball, where he's like the guy. So they approached me that day at camp and say, hey, Will, man, this is what we're doing. You think you'd be interested? And of course, being a 14-year-old, the first thing I said, yes. But I said, but we got to talk to my mom, we got to talk to Curtis. Without their approval, we don't do anything. 2 days later, they show up at my house, and my mom and my brothers, they sign off on it. And from there, Hoop Dream starts.
That's awesome. And when you talk about Ping, it's Coach Gene, is it Pingatore is how you pronounce it? Pingatore?
Yes. Pingatore.
He was the legendary coach at St. Joseph's High School, coached Isaiah Thomas. That's the school Isaiah went to, right? So there had to be some appeal for you to go there because Isaiah went there.
Well, that's interesting. I remember how it even started. I was playing in our grade school tournament, which, by the way, Arthur and I played in the same grade school tournament.
That's
in
awesome.
Chicago. What's really amazing is you don't see it as much now, but grade school tournaments were huge. It really kind of decided what high school you were going to go to. So I remember we were playing, and the team we were playing forfeited. And St. Joe's, one of the assistant coaches, was there. And he's like, oh, there's no game. So he gets up and leave. Well, he's getting ready to leave, but I'm standing under the basket, and he didn't know who I was. I jump up underneath the basket and dunk the basketball. He says, come here. So I go over there like, who's this guy? Gonna be frank, like, who's this white guy calling me, telling me to come here? So I go over, and he's like, is your name William Gates? I said, yeah. He said, did you just dunk that basketball? I said, yeah. He said, can you do it again? I did it once. Yeah, I can do it again. He said, let me see you do it again. So I go back over, and this time, because I'm probably was showing off at this point, I go up and, make it even more, go with two hands and kind of double pump it. He's like, hey, here's my card. Here's my information. And then, of course, my coach runs over, grabs the card, and he's like, how would you like to come out and take a visit at St. Joe's? I had never heard of St. Joe's. Right. Didn't know where it was at. Didn't know that Isaiah went there. Didn't know any history about it. But I went back home. I talked to my brother, and he was like, he had heard about St. Joe's because he used to play against them, and he played against Tony Reeder, who's a Marquette alum as well as a St. Joe's alum. Okay. And he was like, no, you should go out there and visit. So I go out there and visit, and Jason, I kid you not, we talk, Lord, putting you to sleep kind of talk. He's like, let's take a walk through the school. Go to the school, all of a sudden they start seeing trophies and this. And then I walk past this trophy case. And inside the trophy case is Isaiah Thomas. Big old cutout of him. The 1984 MVP All-Star Game trophy is in there with it. Yep. His USA basketball is in there. And I'm like, Isaiah went here? You didn't tell me that Isaiah went here. He's like, oh, we want to show that to you last. And at that point, man, they was doing this. We got them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they was reeling me in, man. And from that point, I knew I wanted to go. And then what really sealed it was, again, when Arthur was playing Isaiah, literally after camp, Isaiah and I had about an hour talk. And he just shared his whole thing about how he came from the inner city, how this was the best decision that he had ever made, that it changed his life, changed his family's life. And he said, Will, I'm not trying to sell you on anything, but he said, if you want a better life, he said, not just basketball, he said, you need to do this. And I did it.
Wow. Yeah, you did. And it's funny because that's not in the movie. When you watch it, there's not this hour conversation with you and Isaiah Thomas. Although when you're watching the conversations, because again, I just rewatched this just yesterday as we record this. So it's on HBO Max. If people want to go watch Hoop Dreams right now, they can go to HBO and you can watch it. There's this conversation that you have with Coach Ping, and you're watching some film of Isaiah, I think from high school. And he's telling you, you're a better shooter than Isaiah. And I'm thinking, man, if I was 14 years old, 15 years old, and some dude was telling me I was a better shooter than, say, Larry Bird, who was my basketball hero as a kid, right, I'd be eating that up. Like, you really think I'm better than him? So that must have been pretty incredible to hear that as a young kid when you're hearing this guy who, and I know he talked about Isaiah a lot because you watched the movie and he mentions Isaiah, and why wouldn't he if you coached Isaiah Thomas? But that must have been pretty awesome to hear that.
It was, but his was interesting. One thing I'll give Coach was that he always pumped me up that way though, because he knew that was my learning style. Like he knew I was the kind of guy that, if I chew him down, I gotta build him up quickly. Because I need him. So that video, when they showed that was kind of like maybe the 20th time Coach and I had, sitting there and watch Isaiah films because he wanted me to see. I mean, as a matter of fact, I remember him he used to tell me I really should have played Isaiah on varsity as a freshman. He said, I'm not going to make that mistake. You're going to come up, which is interesting story was when I first got to St. Joe's, I didn't know what level I was going to play on. So they put me on the sophomore team. One of my best coaches I've ever had named Dennis Doyle, God rest his soul, he passed away. He was the JV coach. And we were playing in this Proviso East tournament. Now, this tournament was a great JV tournament. It had future NBA All-Stars like, Mike Finley, Dunny Boyce, Sherelle Ford. I mean, it was, Tom Klein. It was a lot of great players that came out of there. They were just young. And I remember we were playing Proviso East, and we were losing by 30 at halftime. Get into the locker room. Coach Doyle looks at me and said, Gates, I thought you was tough. I thought you was from Cabrini Green. You ain't nothing. You the softest, he said, black kid I've ever seen in my life. Wow. And I mean, he starts riding into me. He said, if you don't go out there and help us win this game, I'm kicking you out of the school. I mean, he was just going crazy. And then we go out in the second half, and we started playing. And I remember running up and down the court. It was our ball. I was like, Coach, what play we running? He said, the play is called, you get the ball, put it in the basket. I said, oh, we playing like that? Yes. I scored like 50 in the second half, and we ended up winning the game. It was like, I knew you was going to be good. I just needed to.
And then you were on varsity right after that, probably, right?
I was on varsity right after that, yes. Yes, I was.
I love that. William Gates is joining us here on Sports Spectrum. The movie, it really takes... Because let me start over because I have so many questions when you go back and watch it. Did you know that it was going to be for your entire high school career when they said we want to do this? Or were you thinking maybe, okay, just freshman year, follow me through? Or was the sign up, if you will, or the sign off on this movie, this is going to be your entire high school career?
No, we didn't know that. Originally, again, it was supposed to be higher goals. They were going to shoot for 2 weeks about how kids go from street ball to organized basketball. But then even when they came back and say, hey, how would you guys be open to continue filming? We kind of thought at that point, okay, maybe another month or two that it would just show the greater progression. Because we kind of thought that maybe they didn't get enough of what they were looking for. So, but we never knew that out of it hoop dreams. So it wasn't like it went from higher goals and they had this brainstorming ideas. Let's call it hoop dreams. Really, hoop dreams came kind of like in year 3, right? At that point, where the name, came from. So now we had no idea, but they just kept coming back. We want to keep filming. We want to keep filming. Are you guys open to it? And yeah, at that point.
In the midst of being because your career, if you watch the movie, obviously, you had the knee injuries and, you had some tough times and you had some great times and some success. You didn't win the states, but there's like you battling to try and get there. And then there's these really tough moments, which I thought were so well depicted in the film of you having to go through the lows. Again, lows based on a 16-year-old kid losing a game, but it's still lows. I mean, that's your world, basketball. At some point, are you just thinking, man, please get these cameras out of my face?
Oh, all the time.
The time.
I think when, when you're getting on the bus, you're embarrassed. You're in the classroom, you're embarrassed because at some point the teacher's going to call on you or you feel forced to have to raise your hand. But the other aspect of it, it was moments when, like you say, it was heart-wrenching and you don't want to come across looking soft. You don't want to come across looking, vulnerable. But yet, there and the way that Peter Gilbert, who's the film guy, man, he had the camera like
right on you guys.
Yeah, like, you see the tear rolling, and he's like, that's not like a distant shot. Like he's like right there and you're so emotionally caught in that moment. But I think on some level, Jason, I think I still was like, man, really? Right now? Yeah. This is the moment y'all want to capture. Failure? No. But
there's a moment too where you were walking off the court and I don't remember if it was your junior year or your senior year, and you're walking off the court after a loss, and you were downtrodden. Your head was down, and you could see the camera was right up following you into the locker room. And I'm thinking, it must have taken everything inside of you not to just push, I hate to say it because you don't want to be violent or anything, but like push that camera away, like get away. It must have taken everything inside of you.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I don't know if a lot of people recognize, but I think for both Arthur and I, the emotional constraints we were under, I didn't know what Hoop Dreams was going to become, but still on some level, and maybe this was probably because of the neighborhood I grew up in, sure. I felt a level of responsibility, man, that I just couldn't get out of character. I couldn't be what I wasn't. I couldn't be what people probably anticipated or thought, how African Americans react, or, I felt all of those emotions, and yet I tried to keep them, in a cap bottle.
And you probably don't even realize it's going to be seen by as many people that would eventually see it. When you're in the midst of it, you're like, okay, maybe a couple thousand people are going to watch this. And it becomes, I can't tell you how many, but I'm sure it's in the millions right now, maybe more, that have seen this movie. And it was a process. This was 86, 87 when they're coming up to you, 88 maybe, when they're coming up to you with the idea, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it didn't come out until 1994. So it's a 7-year process. And when they're finishing filming, at least from the end of the movie, it's the 91, early fall of 91, I believe, when you're in college at Marquette. And then the movie doesn't come out till 3 years later. So the process of putting this film together, you must have been at a point where you were like, is this thing actually happening? Did I just waste 4 years of my life?
Right.
Or were they staying in contact with you and keeping you in touch of what was happening with this film?
Actually, they did. They stayed in contact because one of the things that they thought was critical was that they would send us bits and pieces of the film and say, hey, man, was this accurate? Did you remember this time? We want to make sure we got this right.
That's good.
And they did. Like when I would come home from summer break, they would have meetings with the family and I. We would sit down and watch different sections of it. So they did. They kept us involved. But you're right. The process of it was, at that point, when they was coming around, they almost had to, yank me in the room, because I was like, man, I thought we was done, over with. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Because and I probably didn't want to see it because I knew what the outcome was already.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to watch a knee injury. I don't want to watch a knee surgery, even though I did watch my knee surgery. But
yeah,
I didn't want to relive those moments. At that point, I was trying to rediscover Will Gates, the basketball player at Marquette University. I was more focused on trying to do that than watch and give them information was this accurate. So I missed a lot of them sessions.
So what's the best thing and maybe the worst thing when you look back? I mean, is there a worst thing? Is there a negative that you can find from being in the film?
I don't think there's a negative at all, because I think the impact that it has had on the culture, that it's had on society.
Yes.
I think Hoop Dreams opened up Pandora's box in a sense. I often heard, people say, it's the first reality TV show, and we'll take that. But I do think it exposed, an area of sports and life that many folks were dealing with and going through, and that a lot of folks didn't know about. So, but it also showed, I think, how not just in the inner cities, but the fight for that basketball dream, man. It doesn't have a color on it. It just it has obstacles and and other things in your way. Color is the last thing that that stopped me from the game of basketball. It was injuries. It was it
was real life.
It was real life. Mm-hmm.
So one of my favorite parts of, and this will probably be the last thing I mentioned about the movie, is I remember being in the theater. So it's 1994, and I'm watching, and you're at the Nike All-American Basketball Team Camp. And I'm like, all right, what's this all about? And I knew that was like a prestigious camp because you hear about it, the Nike Basketball Camp. And then you see Bobby Knight and Jim Boeheim and Joey Meyer, and your coach is in there from Marquette. And then you see a very young Jalen Rose and Chris Webber and Kevin Ollie, and even Dick Vitale and Spike Lee are making appearances. And I'm thinking, I'm watching you, and I'm like, does William Gates understand, not that what was going to happen, but did you understand the prestigious part of being a part of this camp, and especially not knowing that, what was going to happen to Jalen? Certainly a former colleague of mine at ESPN, Jalen Rose, and Chris Webber, and obviously one of the great players, and even Juwan Howard was in there. So you saw a little glimpse of the Fab Five in Hoop Dreams, which had already taken place, but not at that point. For me, that was the best part because it related to some of the guys who did end up having that hoop dream that you and Arthur both wanted to have. And yet watching you at this camp thinking, I don't think you understand how special, or maybe it's just how unbelievably special it was. Did you?
Actually, I did. I knew I knew the moment. I knew the time. I knew that I think everybody at that camp understood the moment. You knew this was different than how it is now. If you was at that camp, you were one of the top 100 guys in the nation, period. Because 101 didn't make it. It was 100. So I knew it was special. But because I had been on that track, I kind of just walked into it. So it wasn't uncommon to see Chris Webber. It wasn't uncommon to see Jalen Rose. I always saw these guys at camp. I saw Travis Best at camp, Allen Henderson, Danielle. I saw all these guys, whether it was at 5-star, we didn't have necessarily an AAU circuit, but on a type circuit out there, like seeing Big Dog Robinson, I saw these guys. So we were actually friends in high school. We call them summer friends because that's when you connect with one another. So it was prestigious, and I knew it. But because we all were very familiar with each other, we all were comfortable being at the camp.
Sports Spectrum today is presented by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. And right now, children around the world are living in poverty and facing unimaginable circumstances as a result of COVID-19. And communities in poverty are facing shutdowns and restrictions, just like we are, but without any safety net. And as hardworking day laborers, most of the families Compassion serves work each day in order to buy food for that day and maybe the next. And where many of us have stocked up for days or weeks at a time, they have neither the income or even refrigeration to afford to stay at home. And as a result, parents are forced to make unthinkable choices between going to work and risking infection, or not going to work and facing hunger and starvation. And COVID-19 has multiplied their needs exponentially, and they need help. That's where Compassion comes in. That's where you can come in. With Fill the Stadium, a pro-athlete-led initiative raising critical resources for 70,000 children and their families impacted by COVID. Every empty seat represents one child who needs support for the critical next 12 months. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty, and we need your help. You can go to the website, fillthestadium.com. Fillthestadium.com. That's the website. Check it out. You can give, you can donate, and help release these children and their family from poverty. Fillthestadium.com. We're also presented today by Water Mission, and they're a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry fighting the global water crisis with safe water and sanitation and hygiene solutions. And right now they are working to stop the global spread of COVID-19. Urgently needed safe water and sanitation and hygiene solutions. They're providing them, Water Mission is, to refugee settlements and other vulnerable communities. Listen to some of these numbers. These were statistics right before the pandemic. 4.4 billion people lacking access to adequate sanitation. 2.1 billion people lacking access to safe water around the world. These are billion with a B people that don't have adequate sanitation and safe water. Water Mission is stepping in to fill that gap, and you can join them. You can pray with them, and you can donate right now with Water Mission by going to the website watermission.org. watermission.org, fighting the global water crisis. Watermission.org. William Gates is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, one of the stars of Hoop Dreams, the award-winning, Oscar-nominated documentary. And obviously, William, the hoop dream of making it to the NBA didn't happen. And there's this spot I love at the very end of the movie where you say something to the effect of, if somebody asks you, don't forget me when you get to the NBA, and you responded and said something like, I should have said, if I don't make it, don't forget about me. And then there's this really cool thing that I think a lot of people don't know the story about you that took place specifically about 8-9 years ago. You alluded to it earlier in our conversation when you talked about the loss of your brother Curtis. Take me through the process of post-hoop dreams and coming to the point eventually where you say, you know what, I think ministry and the Lord is calling me to something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, the story with that, Jason, is really crazy because, as I had my family, had always been in church. Actually, my grandfather was a pastor. So there was some linkage there to ministry. But it wasn't until, I was in ministry when Curtis passed. I was youth pastoring at the time. And youth pastoring is a lot different than senior pastoring. I mean,
yes,
youth pastoring, you get to play with, you really get to be the adult teenager. I mean, that's youth pastoring. You get to have just as much fun as they get to have. But it wasn't until when Curtis passed, I felt the Lord calling me to a different level. And I knew he was calling me because I began to despise church. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to hear what the pastor had to say. I kept finding fault in him. I kept finding fault in ministry. And I think a lot of it was because I was angry still that Curtis wasn't here.
Sure.
Like, Lord, why did you take my brother? What's the lesson in this that I needed to learn? And the lesson of it wasn't coming fast enough. So really was just kind of like just disappointed with ministry as a whole. So what ended up happening was the job I was currently working, I kid you not, Jason, they had let me go. So I had lost my job. We lost our home. I lost cars and a bunch of other things. And I just said, wow, what is going on? People that I was calling said, hey, Will, if you ever need anything, man, give me a call. We'll help you out. So I would call them, and they was just like, man, Will, ain't nothing I can do, man. Pray for you, man, feel sorry for you. But what began to happen was the friends I was calling couldn't help it, but all the ministry doors started opening up. Guys that I had known for years was like, yeah, call me. No. But then guys I had never known was like, oh, yeah, hey, Will, listen, come on down here, man. We want to talk to you. So I still remember I get a call to go to this breakfast because they're like, well, we want your opinion on some things, man. You're in the sports. You can really help us. But I walk into the room. It's like, it's like Tony Evans, all these prolific preachers in there.
Sure.
Had to be at least 12 or 13 of them in there. And I walk into the room like, what kind of breakfast is this? And why am I invited to it? Like I'm like honored, like, man, I get to sit in here and have breakfast with these brilliant minds. And they're like, well, Will, I know you thought that this was about breakfast and your opinion on sports. He says, no, we're here to pray for you. I said, huh? They said, there's a calling on your life, and today you need to accept it. You've been running, you've been doing everything except for what God wants you to do, and this is the calling that God has placed on you. So those men prayed over me on that breakfast, and that day I accepted that calling, and I remember going home telling my wife, I believe this is what God wants me to do, and before I know it, all the things started falling into place again. Ministry doors began to open up. I remember going back to the neighborhood, talking to the pastors in the neighborhood, said, hey, man, God want me to come back here and preach in the neighborhood. And they was like, Will, why would you want to come back here and preach? I said, I don't know. I said, I really don't want to, because at that point I was actually really hurt by the neighborhood because one of we ended up finding out the guy who killed my brother was from the neighborhood. So I was like, I don't want to go back and preach there. I'm like, good riddance. I'm done with it because I felt betrayed at that point. But I told him, I said, no, this is what God wants me to do. And before I know it, I had connected with Moody Church, and they brought me on the pastoral staff team. And before I know it, man, I just went out and started talking to people and building it and growing it. And we had that first Sunday service, 2003, in the project buildings. I mean, it was crazy. And before I knew it, it just kept growing and growing and growing. But the emphasis really became kind of like twofold because the neighborhood was changing too. It was gentrifying. So, they were moving a lot of the old residents out, bringing in new residents, bringing up new buildings, knocking down old buildings. So the goal became really to connect men back to their families. And also, as they were being moved out the neighborhood, connect them with new churches and new neighborhoods that they were going to move into. And I think we were very impactful that way. And at the same time, of course, always was to bring people into a relationship with Christ. I mean, that was it. And man, I tell you, Jason, that was probably some of the most meaningful work I've ever done in my life because it wasn't easy. It was extremely difficult, challenging, late night calls, early mornings. And again, I'm still living in, Cabrini. I mean, there was a lot of death. There was a lot of funerals, a lot of sitting down with families, trying to explain to them that, God loves them in spite of what we're dealing with, and that, unfortunately, bad things happen to good people. You're trying to bring that across to folk. And but after the 10 years there, and I felt a release from God, and my wife had always wanted to move, and we looked at 3 locations because she wanted hot weather. So we looked at Texas, we looked at Arizona, and we looked at Florida, and Texas won out. And man, we didn't know anybody down here. We just came out on faith and said, we're going to move, we're going to get up, and we're going to go, and believing that this is what God has for us for the next step. And here we are, 8 years later.
And you're still doing some teaching and preaching, and God's calling you in a pretty cool place right now, right?
Yeah, still doing some teaching and preaching, still love it. Even more so now because, everybody wants to know, man, what is God saying these days? What is God doing? Is this pandemic? What's the purpose in it? And of course, God always has a purpose in whatever he does, but the main thing I try to tell folks is that just because we're in the pandemic, I don't want them to confuse it that God started the pandemic. There are things that he allowed it, but I was like, God doesn't do wrong.
That's right.
He only does right. So he allowed it because he's going to use it. But and what we have to do as individuals, what we have to do corporately, is really connect back with him to see. And a lot of that comes out of our reading. We've seen pandemics in the Bible before. This is the first time, Earth has had a pandemic. We had to go back and read. And how did Moses handle the pandemic? How did Joshua handle the pandemic? And we got to follow those steps. And I think if we do that, we'll have success coming out of this pandemic.
How does your faith help kind of guide you in the way that you parent? You mentioned your sons, and obviously we didn't say this, but you just became a grandfather too, and that's exciting, and becoming Grandpa Will, and yet you have kids who just graduated college too, and both of them played, I think 2 of your sons played basketball, right? One at Furman and one at Houston Baptist, you mentioned.
Actually, they both played at Houston Baptist. He transferred from Furman, and he went to Houston Baptist. So, man, that was one of the greatest joy to see my boys play together. I'm like, who gets that?
That's a hoop dream right there,
right? Yes.
Seriously.
Yes. And I think the faith for them growing up, I think one of the things I've always tried to show in my family was a strength of respectability. Particularly having more boys than girls, I wanted them to know that, as young men coming up, your dad responsibility is to teach you leadership, is to teach you how to, not saying that you can't have your moments in life where you just like, but after you have the get up and get back on track, you got to keep fighting, you got to keep pressing. So to watch them grow as men in their faith, even to this day, they still call me, hey, Dad, what do you think about this? And hey, I was going on that. What does God have to say about that? Or Dad, did you know in the Bible that it said this? It lets me know that all the things that my wife and I placed in them, that as the Bible says, if you teach them while they're young, even if they stray, they'll recall it and come back home. So, but we've been grateful that our boys have always stayed home in terms of their relationship with God.
Good.
And as a matter of fact, my Will Jr., man, he just got engaged this past Christmas. So
It's exciting.
And like I say, too, one of the things I think I'm Jason, probably the greatest joy that I've had is that my wife and I, both of us are from Cabrini. We've been married 27 years. It's still the same woman from the movie.
Yeah.
To watch our kids, Alicia, who's the little girl in the movie, she's a college graduate. Will Jr. is a college graduate. Jalen is a college graduate. And we got one more who's a senior in high school right now on his way to college. To come from a community that we came from where that just wasn't the norm.
Yeah.
To see that in my family is, man, it's overwhelming sometimes. I'm just like, wow. And it's not that they won't have troubles or issues or delays in life, but the fact that they are educated enough that they can go out and compete in life has been nothing greater than to see that.
So the last two things I want to ask you, one's going to be about a story that's, I didn't even tell you I was going to ask you, but I read about it. So I do want to hear about it, and I'll tell you that in a second. But you also have this clothing, hd22clothing.com is the website. It's the Hoop Dreams clothing. Can you kind of tell me what that is and let people know I mean, I think you're wearing the hat right now, if I'm not mistaken, the HD hat.
Got a little shirt on,
Got the shirt on too. So tell me about the apparel company.
Well, the apparel company really was just birthed out of, sitting at home during the pandemic time. And because, I also, I coach AAU. And since AAU wasn't happening and but you need to stay connected with the game. So I just felt God said, hey, listen, here's an opportunity where, because you really have never done much with the Hoop Dreams yourself. Here's an opportunity where you got some time, study up on it, read up on it, see what you need to do. In other words, go get training that we should always do. Go get training. So what came out of it was what I've been trying to instill in these kids all their life is that you need to prepare for greatness. Mm-hmm. And that's what the clothing line is centered around. Prepare for greatness and go for it and see how far it would take you. And as you're going along the ride, bring others along with you. So that's the whole, as I said, enchilada with the clothing line. Yeah. But at the same time, Jason, I think it's really nice. I think it's definitely built to get in the gym to go hoop right away. But at the same time, if you just want to chill and relax in it, it has that flavor and that flair too. But the biggest thing is, I'm proud of it that it was a step of faith to go out on it because, again, we're in a pandemic. Right. And it's like, man, you starting a clothing line in a pandemic? So, but it was just another level that I think I needed to go to, not just for me, even for my children, to see that, hey, man, you gotta start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can do. And that's how HD22 Clothing was birthed.
Yeah, people can check it out. hd22clothing.com is the website, hd22clothing.com. All right, so the question I have for you, I read that in 2001, you worked out with a certain GOAT named Michael Jordan in preparation for Jordan's comeback. Tell me that's true, and if so, tell me about the story. What happened?
It actually is true. And here's what's interesting. It really just, even when his comeback, I was making a comeback as well. Yeah. So what ended up happening was I had felt this glimmer, man, what if I was good enough to play in the league? And now here's the thing. I was also, this was like right before ministry started in my life. Matter of fact, when at 2001, I was at this conference called CCDA, which stands for Christian Community Development Association. So I'm out at this Christian conference, getting all this godly information in. And I hear God says, call your trainer. Now, Jason, I had not talked to my trainer in maybe 10 or 12 years. I was like, God, I don't even know his phone number. I said, if you want me to call him, God, you got to miraculously give me his phone number. Instantly, boop, all 7 digits popped in my head. I said, you got to be kidding me. This can't be his phone number. I'll call him up. He picks up the phone. I said, Steve, this is Will. He said, Will who? I said, Will Gates. He said, man, I thought you fell under a rock. So I tell him about the vision. I said, hey, man, I'm going to do this again, and I need your help. He says, how much you weigh? Now, he's being sarcastic. How much you weigh? Now, I kid you not. This was like November 5th. I weighed, at that time, 250 pounds. And he was like, Will, are you sure you want to do this? I said, yeah. I said, and I need to get started right away. He said, okay. He said, how long you going to be out there? I said, I'm going to be out there a couple more days. He said, I want you to start trying to do 100 push-ups a day.
Wow.
I said, okay, I can do that. Man, the first 10 killed me. But I do it 2 weekends. And he said, when you get back in town, call me and we'll set it up. So I got back in on that Sunday, called him that Monday. And before I know it, from November 5th, by the time we hit January 2nd, I had lost 50 pounds.
Wow.
200 pounds, lean, in shape, back at college weight. And so I'm playing ball. Like I'm playing down at Moody Bible because, this is where the NBA guys, when they come in to play the Bulls, this is where they practice at. So I'm down there playing against a lot of, guys who play in the league or guys who playing overseas. They come in and play. And we're doing this, and this is like, I want to say, think early June, I believe. I get a call from Michael Jordan's trainer, Tim Grover. He says, hey, Will, I hear that. First of all, I'm like, how did you get my phone number, first of all? But he says, hey, Will, I hear, man, you trying to make a comeback. He said, well, listen, on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, we're playing over here at Hoops the Gym. He said, you should come by at 11. I get there, and first day I walk in, man, it's the 1990-91 Bulls championship team. I'm like,
holy cow.
I'm like, man, this is super nostalgic right now. You don't even want to hoop. You just want to admire these guys. And and before I know it, we're playing and we're going at it. And June, then July gets here. By the time July gets here, so all of the the pro guys who, wasn't playing, they started showing up. Matter of fact, this is the first time I met LeBron James. 17-year-old kid shows up. Wow. He's at the gym, and I'm like, who is this 17-year-old monster right here? Didn't know it was going to be the LeBron James we saw now.
Sure.
But he was definitely 6'9", 255 then. I'm like, this dude is a pro. So you could tell right away. So as we're playing and we're working out, again, I'm seeing all these North Carolina guys. Jordan pulls me to the side and said, Will, what are you trying to do? I said, Mike, I'm trying to play. This is when he said, well, listen, I'm going to give you an opportunity to come play with my team. For real?
Right, because he was an exec with the Wizards at the time.
He was at the execs at the Wizards. But then he made the announcement. When he made that announcement, it's funny. When Jordan made that announcement, he was in Washington, but we had just played that night. So after we had got done playing, he went to Washington, made the announcement that he was going to play, came back that day, and we played that night.
Wow.
So next thing I know, I'm always on his team, and we're playing. And the day before, I was getting ready to go to the camp, and I break my foot. Hairline fracture. And of course, they can't wait. It was like the pre-camp before camp.
Right.
And so, but I don't give up. I get a tryout with the Bulls, and I'm thinking like, man, this is great. Chicago, nothing against him, but your former colleague, Jay Will.
Yeah.
He had just gotten hurt by the Bulls.
That's right. Of course.
So I'm thinking like, man, they need a guard. I'm from Chicago. Hoop dreams is still big. Man, at least, they'll put me on the team. I go out there and I play extremely well. But by the time I got home, I had a temperature of like, man, well over 100 degrees. And I couldn't go back the next day. And that's when I knew God was calling me to something different.
Wow.
But what I really learned in all of that was And this is why I tell people, be careful what you pray for. Because I got exactly what I prayed for. I asked God, I wanted to know if I was good enough to play in the league. And I found out that I was good enough. But I should have prayed, Lord, I want to go play in the league.
Want to play in the league, right?
Yes,
you got to be specific in your prayers, Will.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But man, that was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I still laugh at this because I remember going to the gym. And I kid you not, Jason, man, when I pull up in the parking lot, I look around, it had to be at least $1 billion worth of cars.
I can't imagine. Oh my gosh.
I was like, man, I ain't never seen that kind of money in my life, man. Just seeing these Lamborghinis.
But it's fascinating to think that's kind of the hoop dream that you had. Like if you were 14-year-old Will, which is in the movie, and you're watching Jordan in that 1988 All-Star game with Isaiah, and somebody said to you, you know what, someday you're going to play ball against Michael Jordan. It might not be in the NBA, but not only are you going to play against him, you might even play with him and play some ball with him later on. You would have signed up for that. That's kind of the hoop dream, right?
Easy. One of the things that I never did was I never faulted my injury for what could have been. Because if you go there, man, you go there, you tear yourself to pieces. But you're right. The moments that I've had in terms of the game of basketball, I tell people that I got to do some things that the average person doesn't get to do. I said, even from high school to college, I said, man, when you're in college and you're going to go play Michigan, you're playing Duke, you my freshman year, we go to Australia. I mean, just for, quote unquote basketball trip, you play a little ball out there, but you're really having a lot of fun. I mean, the things that I got to do because of the game of basketball. Yeah, I didn't get the ultimate hoop dreams, but I got many hoop dreams along the way. And again, when I was playing at Hoops to Gym, I mean, here comes Jerry Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace, Penny Hardaway, Reggie Miller. I mean, guys was just showing up, every day, a whole new, and I'm just looking like, man, I just saw you playing on TV. I mean, they were losing the NBA playoffs, and they were at Hoops to Gym the next day. I mean, it was like, one, because Mike has that pull. If he call you,
of course,
you're going to show up. But you're right, man. And the great thing is, those are memories that I'll have forever, that I'll be able to share with, that I've shared with my kids. And now, I get to share one day with my grandchildren.
Absolutely. He is William Gates, the star of Hoop Dreams. Make sure if you have HBO, you go watch Hoop Dreams again. It's just fantastic. And it's a really good look into basketball in the late 80s and early 90s from Arthur Agee and William Gates, our guest. Here's today's point of view. Will, thanks, man. So good to get to know you. God bless you, brother. Congrats on all your success. And I mean success with your family more than anything else, because that's success. That's true success. All the best to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
And that was William Gates, the star of Hoop Dreams. Make sure if you have HBO, you spend some time in the next couple of weeks or months watching Hoop Dreams, especially if you're, the parent of a child who loves sports and maybe is thinking about going into, a higher level of sports, whether it's college or even beyond, and watch Hoop Dreams. It's really a fascinating look at what life was like in the inner city for a couple of kids who had these dreams of achieving, like he said, higher goals, but eventually hoop dreams. And it's a great documentary. That was a fun conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did, because that took me back a little bit. And William Gates has been through a lot. We could have done another hour. I mean, really, we could have talked about his relationship with Arthur Agee. We could have talked about the pandemic and race relations and other things going on in 2020. We didn't get there, and that's okay, because I thought this was a fantastic conversation. By the way, I did ask William after the conversation was recorded how he and Arthur Agee are doing. Do they have a relationship? Again, if you've watched Hoop Dreams, Arthur is the other basketball player, the other student that was featured in the documentary with William Gates, and he said him and Arthur still are on speaking terms and have a good relationship. So that's great to hear with both William and Arthur Agee. So we appreciate William for joining us again on the show. Check out the website, hd22clothing.com. The HD, of course, for Hoop Dreams, hd22clothing.com, and help support William with his new venture with the clothing line for Hoop Dreams, and just appreciate him for joining us here today on the show. And that Michael Jordan story was epic, wasn't it? I loved that Michael Jordan story. So appreciate him. We also appreciate our partners and sponsors today, Water Mission, fighting the global water crisis. Check them out, watermission.org. And of course, our friends at Compassion International. They got a great initiative going on to fill the stadium and release kids from poverty. Fillthestadium.com is that website. You can check out fillthestadium.com. Thanks again for tuning in to today's show. Make sure you check out our website, sportspectrum.com. And then whatever app you're listening to this podcast on, make sure you subscribe and then rate and review and all the things that help get the word out on the intersection of sports and faith and the content that we're producing and the show that we're producing here with Sports Spectrum. My name is Jason Romano. Thanks for tuning in. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe.